Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was found by Tony Stark and became his protégé. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind was a cruel thief. It whipped across the rooftop, stealing the warmth from Izuku Midoriya's thin school uniform and snatching at the loose, tear-soaked pages of his notebook. It felt like the world was trying to physically peel away the last vestiges of his dream, scattering them into the smog-choked sky over Mizutsufu. His throat was a raw, constricted knot. He could still hear the words, echoing in the cavernous space where his heart used to be. They were worse than any punch from Kaken, worse than any pitying look from his teachers. They were a final, definitive judgment delivered from the lips of God himself. It's not wrong to dream. But you have to be realistic, kid. The voice of All Might, the symbol of peace, the man whose smile could save thousands, had just methodically, clinically, dismantled Izuku's entire existence. He'd taken the cornerstone of his identity, the unwavering belief that he, too, could be a hero, and crushed it into dust. Izuku's legs gave out. He slid down the cool metal of an air conditioning unit, his back hitting it with a dull thud. His gaze was fixed on the railing at the edge of the roof. It was a simple, 3-bar fence, designed to stop maintenance workers from taking a careless step. Below, the city buzzed with an indifferent energy, a sprawling circuit board of lives that would go on, completely unaware of the small, personal apocalypse that had just occurred on this forgotten rooftop. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a quirk in your next life. Kaken's voice, sharp and ugly, slithered into his thoughts. For the first time in his life, the barb didn't just sting, it resonated. It felt less like an insult and more like a grim, practical suggestion. What was the point? What was the point of getting up tomorrow? Of going to school? Of filling another notebook with analysis that everyone, even his idol, saw as a useless obsession? His fingers, numb and trembling, found the notebook lying beside him. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. The cover was still blackened and smelled faintly of burnt sugar from where Kaken had exploded it before tossing it out the window. The pages were warped and stiff from its dip in the koi pond. It looked as pathetic and broken as he felt. With a surge of self-loathing, he picked it up, his grip so tight his knuckles turned white. This was the problem. This was the proof of his delusion. 13 volumes of meticulous, handwritten notes, diagrams, and theories. All of it predicated on a future that was, according to the world's greatest authority, a statistical impossibility, a 0% chance. The wind gusted again, stronger this time. It flipped open the notebook, the pages crackling in protest. It landed on the fresh entry for Mount Lady, her gigantification quirk broken down into potential weaknesses, collateral damage, limited mobility in confined spaces, a predictable power-down period. It was good analysis. He knew it was. But it was also useless. It was the work of a fan, an armchair quarterback. Not a hero. A guttural sob ripped its way out of his chest, a sound of pure, undiluted agony. He slammed the notebook shut and, with a scream that was swallowed by the city's roar, he hurled it away from him. It tumbled end over end, a dark, rectangular bird with broken wings, before landing with a sad slap near the rooftop railing. He watched it lie there, a monument to his failure. The finality of the act was terrifying. He'd just thrown away his life's work. The only thing he'd ever been good at. He buried his face in his hands, the rough fabric of his trousers scratching against his tear-streaked cheeks. He didn't want to be a police officer. He didn't want to be a doctor. He didn't want to be realistic. He wanted to be the person who ran in when everyone else ran out. He wanted to be the one who could look a scared, crying person in the eye and say, with a smile that meant it, "It's fine now." Why? Because I am here. But he couldn't. He was a faulty product. A defective unit in a world of superpowers. A Deku. Useless. He didn't know how long he sat there, adrift in a sea of despair. The sun began its slow descent, painting the undersides of the clouds in bruised shades of orange and purple. The sounds of the city shifted, the distant sirens and traffic giving way to the murmur of evening commuters. It was only when a sudden, loud explosion echoed from a few blocks away that his head snapped up. Plumes of black smoke billowed into the air. Another villain attack. His body tensed, an old, ingrained reflex. Go see. Go analyze. The thought was there, a ghost of his former self, but it died just as quickly. What for? To scribble more useless notes? To stand in the crowd and dream of a life he could never have? No. Not this time. This time, he would stay right here, on this rooftop, with the ghost of his shattered dream for company. For the last time, FRIDY, I am not interested in a culturally enriching tea ceremony with the Minister of Clerk Affairs, Tony Stark said, his voice dripping with bored irritation. Unless the tea is 18-year-old single malt scotch, and the ceremony involves him signing over the patent rights for that new kinetic dampening polymer, I've taken the liberty of declining on your behalf, boss. A calm, feminine voice replied from invisible speakers embedded in the limousine's plush interior. I cited extreme jet lag and a sudden, acute allergy to bureaucratic sycophancy. A ghost of a smile touched Tony's lips. Good girl. Remind me to give you a raise. He was reclining in a seat that was less a piece of automotive furniture and more a throne of supple Italian leather and brushed chrome. Outside the tinted, bulletproof glass, the streets of Musitifu were a blur of neon and concrete. They were, however, a stationary blur. Happy, what's the hold-up? Tony called to the front. Did someone's quirk involve turning the road into artisanal molasses? Happy Hogan's tired eyes met his in the rearview mirror. Villain attack up ahead, boss. The pros have the street cordoned off. Looks like a nasty one, Tony sighed, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. He'd been in Japan for less than 24 hours to headline Stark Industries' first ever Quirk Support Technology Expo. It was a PR move, a market expansion, and a chance to show the hero-saturated Japanese market that a brilliant mind could still outclass raw power any day of the week. So far, it had mostly involved smiling, shaking hands, and avoiding tea ceremonies. He was already bored out of his mind. All right, fine. FRIDY, pull up the news feeds. Let's see what passes for primetime entertainment in this town. A holographic display shimmered into existence above the minibar, a crystal-clear window showing a live news helicopter shot. The scene was chaotic. A grotesque, writhing creature made of green sludge had engulfed a city block and, more disturbingly, a teenage boy. The creature had angry red eyes and a manic, sloshing grin. The boy trapped inside was thrashing, his face a mask of terror, small, contained explosions popping from his palms like firecrackers. That's viscous, Tony muttered, leaning forward slightly. He watched as the local pro-heroes fumbled. Kamui Woods, the popular rookie, couldn't get a grip. His wooden limbs were useless against a fluid opponent. The heavyweight hero, Death Arms, tried to punch his way through, but his fists just sank into the muck with no effect. A new hero, Mount Lady, stood by uselessly, too large to navigate the narrow street without bringing down a building. Amateurs, Tony scoffed, taking a sip of sparkling water. All power, no finesse. They're treating a hostage situation like a demolition job. FRIDY, give me a tactical breakdown. What are its weaknesses? Analysis suggests the villain's primary mass is fluid, but the eyes and teeth appear to be solid-state biological components. FRIDY reported. They represent a potential vulnerability. A targeted, high-pressure impact to the optical region could cause systemic shock and a loss of cohesion. A poke in the eye. Groundbreaking stuff, Tony said dryly. So why isn't anybody doing it? Don't any of these guys have a decent targeting system? Or, a pointy stick? He was about to dismiss the whole pathetic display when something changed. The camera zoomed in on the police line. A flash of green and black. A middle schooler, small and reedy, with a wild mop of dark green hair, broke through the barrier. He was sprinting, his face a bizarre mixture of absolute terror and desperate, unyielding determination. And we have an idiot, Tony announced, gesturing at the screen with his glass. Happy you seeing this? Some kid's got a death wish, Happy grunted. Takes all kinds, boss. But Tony was silent now, his focus entirely on the screen. The kid wasn't just running blindly. His eyes were wide, but they were locked on the villain. He was muttering, his mouth moving a mile a minute. Friday, can you isolate and enhance his audio? Clean it up. Working on it, boss. Audio enhanced. A faint, frantic stream of words filled the car's cabin. Can't breathe, Kaken's suffocating, the heroes can't, their quirks aren't effective, it's fluid, so concussive force is dispersed. But the eyes, he has solid eyes, if I can just create a distraction, an opening, give him a second to breathe, the backpack. Tony's eyebrows shot up. The kid swung the bright yellow backpack off his shoulders and, without breaking stride, hurled it with a surprising degree of accuracy. The bag spun through the air and smacked the sludge villain square in its dominant eye. A notebook and a pencil case flew out, the contents scattering. It was a pathetic attack. A child's weapon. But it worked. The villain roared in pain and surprise, its form spasming. The slimy tendril covering the blonde kid's mouth loosened for a single, crucial second. It was enough. The trapped boy sucked in a desperate gasp of air. Holy shit, Tony whispered. He wasn't impressed by the recklessness. He'd seen plenty of that, and done more than his fair share. He was impressed by the process. In the space of 10 seconds, the kid had analyzed the situation, identified the hero's failures, pinpointed a viable weakness, formulated a plan based on his available resources, a school bag, and executed it. It was messy, it was desperate, and it was suicidally dangerous. It was also brilliant. It reminded him, with a sudden, jarring clarity, of a cave in Afghanistan. Of staring at a box of scraps with a car battery wired to his chest, the tick-tock of his own mortality counting down. It was the same desperate, analytical spark. The same refusal to accept the unwinnable scenario. The will to build a solution, no matter how crude, out of nothing. Then All Might showed up. The number one hero, a walking mountain of muscle and charisma, arrived in a gust of wind and self-aggrandizing bravado. Texas smash, he bellowed, and with a single punch that changed the weather, he splattered the villain across 3 city blocks. The crowd roared. The news anchors swooned. All Might stood there, 2 fists on his hips, laughing his booming laugh. He was the solution. He was always the solution. Tony leaned back in his seat, his jaw tight. He hated it. He hated the reliance on one man, on one godlike power. It was unsustainable. It was a single point of failure. The future couldn't be built on one person's shoulders. It had to be built with brains, with ingenuity, with technology that could empower the many, not just the one. The news feed showed the pro-heroes scolding the green-haired kid for his recklessness, while simultaneously praising the explosive blonde one for his resilience. Tony snorted in disgust. They were praising the bomb and scolding the engineer who tried to defuse it. FRIDY, Tony said, his voice sharp and decisive. Run a facial recognition scan on the green-haired kid. I want his name, his address, his school records, his quirk status, everything. Cross-reference municipal and hospital records. Scan complete. Izuka Midoriya. Age 14. Student at Aldera Junior High. Address on file. The AI replied instantly. Medical records indicate he is quirkless. Quirkless. The word hung in the silent, air-conditioned space. Of course he was. That explained everything. The desperation. The over-reliance on analysis. The complete disregard for his own safety because, in a world of superhumans, he had been told his entire life that he was breakable, that he was less. He had nothing to lose because he'd never been allowed to have anything in the first place. Tony Stark felt a surge of something hot and protective in his chest. It was the same feeling he got when he saw a brilliant design being misused, or a promising young engineer wasting their talent in a corporate cubicle farm. It was a sense of profound, offensive waste. He looked at the screen, where the kid, Izuka Midoriya, was shuffling away from the scene, his shoulders slumped in a posture of utter defeat. He just saved someone's life, in his own small, desperate way, and he looked like he'd just been handed a death sentence. Happy? Tony said, his voice low and serious. Yeah, boss? Change of plans? The expo can wait. Find that kid. The one with the bad hair and the ridiculous amount of guts. Find him now. The walk home was a funeral procession for a life that had never even begun. The vibrant colors of the city had bled out, replaced by a monochrome palette of gray pavement, gray buildings, and a gray sky. The cheerful chatter of passers-by, the clatter of the train on the overhead tracks. It was all just white noise, a muffled soundtrack to his internal silence. The pro-heroes had praised him, in a way. Your heart was in the right place, kid, but that was incredibly reckless. You could have gotten yourself killed. They'd said it while signing autographs for other kids, their attention already elsewhere. Their words felt like pats on the head, condescending and dismissive. They didn't see a potential hero, they saw a liability. A problem they'd had to clean up before the real hero arrived. He was just a quirkless, stupid Deku who got in the way. All Might's words confirmed it. The hero's actions confirmed it. He trudged up the stairs to his apartment, each step weighing 1,000 pounds. He could already picture his mom's face, her worry, her inevitable, tearful apology for a genetic lottery she had no control over. I'm so sorry, Izuku. He loved his mom more than anything, but he didn't think he could bear to hear those words tonight. Not tonight. His route took him down a quiet side street, a shortcut he always used. The streetlights were just beginning to flicker on, casting long, distorted shadows. He kept his head down, his eyes fixed on the cracks in the sidewalk, counting them. 1, 2, 3, a way to keep his mind from spiraling back to the rooftop. A car door opened and closed somewhere behind him. He didn't look up. Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravelly asphalt, approaching quickly. He tensed, a primal jolt of fear running up his spine. Was it a mugger? A villain who'd escaped the chaos? Izuku Midoriya? A gruff, American-accented voice said. Izuku froze, his blood turning to ice. He slowly looked up. A large, imposing man in a black suit stood before him, blocking his path. He had a stern face, a neatly trimmed goatee, and an earpiece. He looked like a bodyguard from an action movie. Izuku's mind went into overdrive. Who is this? How does he know my name? Is he with the heroes? Am I in trouble? Did I break a law by interfering? Before he could stammer out a reply, a second car door opened. This one was different. It closed with a solid, expensive-sounding thump. Out of a sleek, impossibly black car, the kind he'd only ever seen in magazines, stepped a figure that made Izuku's brain short-circuit. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive suit, but it was the sunglasses, the signature goatee, and the aura of casual, universe-denting confidence that were unmistakable. It was Tony Stark, the armored Avenger, Iron Man. The billionaire genius, head of Stark Industries. One of the most famous, brilliant, and powerful men on the planet. He was standing here, on this random side street in Muzurifu, looking at him. Izuku's mouth opened, but all that came out was a strangled squeak. His entire body went rigid with shock. He felt a frantic urge to bow, to apologize for breathing the same air, to run away, all at the same time. Tony Stark took off his sunglasses, his sharp, intelligent eyes scanning Izuku from head to toe. It was an unerringly perceptive gaze, as if he could see every insecurity, every failure, every broken piece of Izuku's 15 years on Earth. Izuku Midoriya, Stark said again, his voice exactly like it was on TV, smooth, confident, and edged with sarcasm. Quirk none. Age 14. Scored in the 99th percentile on your last standardized aptitude test, yet your class rank is mediocre. Probably because you spend more time doodling in those notebooks of yours than paying attention. He gestured with his chin. My associate, Happy, tells me you had a rough day. Met your hero. Didn't go so well, I take it. Izuku felt a hot flush of shame creep up his neck. He knew. He knew everything. Izuku's legs felt weak. He bowed stiffly, a jerky, panicked motion. I am so sorry for any trouble I caused. I didn't mean to get in the way. It was stupid, and I won't do it again, I promise. Tony held up a hand, a gesture that was both casual and commanding. Whoa, kid, easy. You're gonna pull a muscle. I'm not here to read you the riot act. The pros already did that, and frankly, they're wrong. Izuku stared, his mind completely blank. Wrong? Tony Stark tapped a device on his wrist, and a thin, translucent tablet materialized in his hand. He swiped a finger across it, and a holographic image floated in the air between them. It was a wireframe diagram of the sludge villain and a trajectory line. This? Tony said, pointing to the glowing red line that arced from a small figure to the villain's head. Is the throw. Your backpack. Approximate weight 5.2 kilograms. You threw it with a velocity of 14.7 meters per second. Not impressive. What is impressive is the targeting. He zoomed in on the villain's head. FRIDY, that's my AI, ran the numbers. Given the villain's erratic movement and your running start, the probability of you hitting that specific spot, the left ocular cluster, was less than 17%. But you did. Why? Izuku could only blink. I just threw it. No, you didn't, Tony countered, his voice sharp. You didn't just throw it. For a split second, the villain's primary mass shifted to its right to avoid a punch from Death's arms. You observed this. You predicted that its head, the control center, would lag behind for approximately 0.8 seconds. You aimed for where it was going to be. You created an opportunity. He swiped the screen again. Now it showed a thermal image of the trapped blonde boy. The impact caused a neuralgic shock, forcing a momentary relaxation of the villain's grip around the victim's respiratory system. It allowed him one inhalation. That one breath gave him the strength to unleash another explosion, which further disoriented the villain just as All Might arrived. Without your intervention, the victim would have likely suffocated 12 seconds before All Might's punch. The world tilted. Izuku stared at the glowing data, at the cold, hard facts laid out in front of him. Someone had looked at what he did, the most shameful, reckless moment of his life, and they hadn't seen an idiot. They'd seen a plan. They'd seen engineering. Everyone else saw a kid with a death wish, Tony said, his voice softening slightly. I saw something else. You ran into a fight you had a 0% chance of winning. You had no power, no armor, no backup. All you had was a backpack and what's in here. He tapped his own temple. You saw a problem, you analyzed it on the fly, and you executed a solution with what you had. That's not a hero complex, kid. That's who I am. Izuku's eyes were burning. A single, hot tear escaped and traced a path through the grime on his cheek. For the first time all day, it wasn't a tear of sadness or despair. It was something else, something fragile and terrifying and new. It was hope. Tony Stark made the hologram disappear, the tablet dissolving back into his wrist device. He looked Izuku straight in the eye, his expression unreadable but intense. The world is full of people with quirks, kid. People who can punch hard, run fast, or set things on fire. They're a dime a dozen, but people who can think under pressure, who can see the solution inside the problem, they're rare. They're the ones who actually change the world. He took a step closer, the scent of expensive cologne and ozone filling the air. You remind me of me. And I have a policy of not letting profound talent go to waste. Especially when the world is too stupid to see it. Tony extended a hand. It wasn't a handshake. It was an offer. A lifeline. I've got a proposition for you, kid. It's a long shot, it'll be the hardest thing you've ever done, and there's no guarantee of success. But I see potential in you that has nothing to do with superpowers. How would you like an internship? A real one. In my personal R&D lab. Izuku stared at the outstretched hand of Tony Stark, the man who built his own heroism from nothing but iron and genius. He thought of the rooftop. He thought of the suffocating finality of All Might's words, of a future that was a gray, empty void. And now this. An impossible, ridiculous, brilliant light at the end of the tunnel. An internship. A chance. Not to be given a power, but to build one. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of 1,000 possible futures. His voice was a raw, trembling whisper, barely audible over the pounding in his own ears. Why? Tony's lips curved into that trademark, world-famous smirk. It wasn't mocking or arrogant. For the first time, it looked genuine. Because the world told you that you had a 0% chance, he said. And I've always had a soft spot for proving the world wrong. The front door of the Midoriya apartment clicked open with a familiar, weary sigh. It was a sound Izuku had heard every day of his life, but tonight it felt alien, like a relic from a past he had shed only an hour ago on a dark, nameless street. He stepped inside, the worn welcome mat seeming to sag under the impossible weight of his secret. The air smelled of miso and green tea. Home. Comfort. A sanctuary that suddenly felt 2 sizes too small. Izuku? Is that you, sweetheart? Inko Midoriya's voice floated from the kitchen, laced with the gentle anxiety that was her maternal baseline. You're late. I was starting to worry. The news said there was a villain attack near. She trailed off as she came into the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her smile faltered as she saw his face. He knew what she saw, the grime, the tear tracks, the wide, shell-shocked eyes that seemed to be looking at something a million miles away. Her own eyes, so much like his, immediately filled with concern. Izuku! What happened? Are you hurt? She rushed forward, her hands fluttering over his arms and face, checking for injuries. I'm okay, Mom. I'm fine. He managed, his voice a hoarse croak. The words felt like a lie. He wasn't fine. He was remade. Scrambled and reassembled. But the villain. I saw the smoke. I wasn't. I was there. In the crowd. I'm okay. He couldn't tell her the whole truth. Not about running in. Not about the rooftop. Not yet. But the other part, the impossible part, was a supernova of light and noise in his chest, demanding to be let out. Mom! He began, his voice trembling. Something happened. After. Something good. He led her to the small, cozy living room, the space dominated by a glass case filled with all-might memorabilia. The Silver Age statuette on the top shelf seemed to mock him now, a symbol of a dream he'd been forced to abandon only to have a new, stranger one thrust upon him. They sat on the sofa, the cushions sinking around them. He took a deep breath and began to explain. He told her about the man in the suit, the sleek black car, and the name that felt like a fantasy novel on his tongue. Tony Stark. Inko's brow furrowed. The American hero? Iron Man? Izuku, what are you talking about? Was he there for the villain attack? No, Mom, he found me after. He talked to me. He fumbled for the words, his brain struggling to translate the earth-shattering event into a coherent narrative. He saw what I did. At the incident, he saw my notebook. Izuku's voice cracked. He didn't laugh. He didn't think it was creepy or weird. He said it was brilliant. Inko stared at him, her confusion slowly being edged out by a dawning sense of alarm. This sounded like the feverish rambling of a boy who'd had a very bad day. He showed me data. Analysis. Of me. He said I have potential? He looked at his mother, his eyes pleading for her to believe him. Mom, he offered me an internship. The word hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. Inko's face went pale. An internship? With him? But that's for college students, geniuses from the Tokyo Institute of Technology, not a 14-year-old boy. Her voice was a whisper of disbelief. A real one. In his lab. He wants to teach me. Izuku's words tumbled out faster now, the excitement finally breaking through the shock. He said my mind is a power, Mom. My mind. He wants me to go to America. To New York. That was the breaking point. America? Inko's voice shot up, laced with panic. She stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. No. Absolutely not. Izuku, you're a child. I can't send you halfway across the world with a man you just met, no matter who he is. He flies around in a metal suit and fights aliens. It's the most dangerous job in the world. This is insane. Tears welled in her eyes, the familiar flood of maternal terror. But Mom, it's not to fight. It's to learn. To build. This is a chance, the only chance I might ever get to be. He couldn't say a hero. The words still tasted like ash. To be useful, to do something that matters. You matter to me, she cried, the tears now streaming down her cheeks. Here. Safe. Izuku, please, you're quirkless. The world is already so dangerous for you, putting yourself in the center of that world. I can't bear it. His heart ached. This was what he had feared. Her love for him was a warm, protective cage, and he was rattling the bars. How could he make her understand? As if summoned by the sheer force of their emotional impasse, Izuku's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. The screen displayed a blocked number. He hesitated, then a sudden instinct told him to answer. Hello, kid? Put me on speaker. It was Tony Stark's voice, crisp and commanding. Izuku's eyes went wide. He fumbled with the phone, pressing the speaker icon. Stark's voice filled the small apartment, seeming to suck all the air out of the room. Mrs. Midoriya, Tony said, his tone shifting from brisk to unexpectedly smooth. Tony Stark. I apologize for the intrusion, and for the rather unorthodox job offer my associate and I presented to your son. I understand this is a lot to take in. Inko stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Mr. Stark. I don't understand. Why my son? He's just a boy. He's a genius, ma'am. That's why, Tony said simply. And geniuses don't have an age requirement. But you're right, you're his mother, and your concerns are valid, which is why I'm not the person you should be talking to about this. There was a brief pause, a rustle of fabric on the other end. Then a new voice spoke, a woman's. It was calm, professional, and radiated a competence that was instantly soothing. Mrs. Midoriya? My name is Virginia Potts. Most people call me Pepper. I'm the CEO of Stark Industries. CEO? Inko stammered. That's right. Tony gets to have all the fun in the workshop. I'm the one who makes sure the lights stay on and that he doesn't, for instance, spontaneously try to recruit minors without a proper framework in place. She said. There was a hint of dry humor in her voice, but it was underlined with absolute seriousness. A holographic projector on Izuku's phone whirred to life, and a crisp, clear image of a woman with strawberry blonde hair and a sharp business suit appeared above it. Pepper Potts looked directly at Inko, her expression warm and empathetic. I understand your hesitation completely. Let me address your concerns directly. First, safety. The facility where Izuku would be staying and working is the Avengers compound in upstate New York. It is one of the most secure locations on the planet. His residency would be in the civilian wing, which is entirely separate from any operational or hazardous areas. He would be under the constant supervision of myself and our head of security, Mr. Hogan, she continued, ticking off points as if from a mental checklist. Second, education. This is not a replacement for his schooling. We would arrange for accredited private tutors to continue his core curriculum at an accelerated pace. This internship is a supplemental, specialized apprenticeship program. Think of it as the most exclusive STEM program in the world. He would have access to resources and knowledge that no university could offer. Third, and I know this is the most important, you would be able to speak with him via video call every single day. We would fly you out to visit, all expenses paid, whenever you wished. This is not about taking your son away from you. This is about giving him an opportunity that his unique talents have earned him. Inko listened, her panic slowly subsiding, replaced by a dizzying sense of confusion. This was all so professional, so real. It wasn't the whim of an eccentric billionaire. It was a structured, corporate-backed proposal. But it was Izuku who delivered the final, crucial blow to her defenses. He looked at his mom, his own tears now welling up. Mom, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. All my life, all I've ever wanted was to help people. Everyone, even All Might, told me I couldn't because I didn't have a quirk. They told me to give up, he gestured to the phone. He's the first person, the only person, who looked at me, at my notebooks and my muttering, and didn't see a useless dreamer. He saw a tool. Something that could be sharpened, something that could be used to build. Please, Mom. Don't ask me to give this up. It's the only part of my dream that might actually come true. The raw, desperate honesty in his voice struck Inko to her core. She looked at her son, at the burning intelligence in his eyes that she had always seen, the passion she had secretly worried would lead him to ruin. And here was a chance for that passion to become his greatest strength. To protect him, not endanger him. She took a shaky breath, her resolve crumbling. She looked at the holographic image of Pepper Potts, then at her own trembling son. How could she stand in the way of the one person who finally saw him for who he truly was? He'll be safe? She asked, her voice small. I give you my personal guarantee, Mrs. Midoriya. Pepper said, her voice firm and unwavering. He will be our highest priority. Inko finally nodded, a slow, jerky movement. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Izuku. 2 days later, Izuku was sitting in a seat made of cream-colored leather that cost more than his family's car. He was in a Gulfstream G650, a private Stark jet, soaring 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. The culture shock had begun the moment Happy Hogan, looking perpetually grumpy in his driver's uniform, had picked him up in a black Audi that purred like a panther. The farewell with his mother had been a tearful, heart-wrenching affair, filled with promises to call and be safe. Now, he was suspended between his old life and his new one, in a state of profound disbelief. The jet's interior was a study in minimalist luxury. Polished wood, brushed metal, and a silence so complete it felt manufactured. Happy was in a seat across from him, reading a well-worn paperback novel and pointedly ignoring him. Mr. Hogan? Izuku ventured. Happy sighed, not looking up from his book. It's just Happy, kid. And what? Is this what Mr. Stark flies in all the time? Sometimes. Happy grunted. When he's not wearing the high-altitude tin can. Izuku fell silent, his mind trying to process the casual mention of the Iron Man suit. He stared out the window at the endless expanse of blue sky and white clouds. It felt like a dream. He kept expecting to wake up in his own bed, the smell of burnt sugar on his analysis notebook the only lingering evidence of his disastrous day. But this was real. The soft hum of the engines was real. The glass of orange juice on the table beside him, served by a flight attendant who had smiled at him without a hint of pity, was real. Hours later, they began their descent. The blue of the ocean gave way to the green coastline of North America. They didn't fly into a bustling city airport. Instead, they landed at a private airstrip carved into a vast, forested landscape in upstate New York. As the jet taxied to a halt, Izuku saw it. It wasn't a tower. It was a sprawling campus of interconnected buildings, all sleek lines of glass and gleaming white composite material, nestled organically amongst acres of lush forest and a sparkling lake. A Quinjet sat silently on a circular landing pad, its wings folded like a resting bird of prey. This was the Avengers compound. It looked less like a military base and more like the University of the future. The jet door hissed open. The air that greeted him was cool and crisp, smelling of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the urban smog of Muzurifu. Standing at the bottom of the stairs were two figures. The first was Happy. The second was the woman from the video call, Pepper Potts. In person, she was even more striking, exuding an aura of calm authority. She wore a chic but practical pantsuit and offered him a warm, genuine smile. Izuku. Welcome to the compound, she said, extending a hand. He shook it, his own hand clammy and trembling. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for having me, Miss Potts, he stammered, bowing deeply. She chuckled lightly. Please call me Pepper. MS. Potts is for board members I'm about to fire. She handed him a thin, metallic card. This is your access key and comms device. It's keyed to your biometrics, so don't lose it. It'll get you into your quarters, the dining hall, the gym, and the RD labs. It will not get you into the armory, the hangar, or Tony's liquor cabinet. Any questions? Izuku's mind was a blank canvas of overwhelming awe. He just shook his head dumbly. Good. Happy will show you to your room so you can get settled. Tony is being Tony. He'll find you when he's ready. She gave him another reassuring smile before her own comms device chirped. Her expression shifted instantly to one of sharp focus. Excuse me. I have to go deal with the German Chancellor. She turned and walked away with a brisk, purposeful stride, already speaking into her wrist. Izuku was left with Happy, who gestured for him to follow with a jerk of his head. Come on, kid. Let's get this over with. They walked through silent, gleaming corridors. The place was immense, a labyrinth of modern architecture. Through vast panes of glass, Izuku could see people moving about, scientists in lab coats, technicians in gray jumpsuits, security personnel with sharp eyes. At one point he caught a glimpse of a tall, blond man with a shield strapped to his back jogging on a distant training field. Captain America. His heart did a painful feeling flip in his chest. He was breathing the same air as Captain America. Happy led him to a door that slid open silently at the approach of his keycard. The room inside was larger than his entire apartment. It had a comfortable-looking bed, a desk with a holographic interface, a walk-in closet, and a private bathroom. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window looking out over the serene lake. Kitchen's down the hall. Food is available 24/7. Don't make a mess, Happy said gruffly. Get some rest. You look like you're about to pass out. And with that, he was gone, the door sliding shut behind him, leaving Izuku alone in the deafening silence. He walked over to the window, placing a hand on the cool glass. He could see his own reflection, a small, green-haired boy with wide, terrified eyes, looking completely and utterly out of place. He felt like a stray cat that had wandered into a palace. The imposter syndrome was a physical weight, crushing the air from his lungs. What was he doing here? He was a quirkless nobody. A mistake. Mr. Stark had made a mistake. He was going to take one look at him in the light of day and send him home on the next flight, apologizing to his mother for the clerical error. He sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress far plusher than his one at home. He was a fraud, and it was only a matter of time before everyone here realized it. Izuku didn't know how long he'd been sitting there when the doors slid open again. It wasn't Happy this time. It was Tony Stark. He was dressed in worn, grease-stained jeans and a faded black Sabbath t-shirt. He held a mug that said World's Okayest Boss and was chewing on what looked like a blueberry. Took you long enough, Tony said, as if Izuku had been holding him up. You looked at the view. Had your existential crisis? Good. They're scheduled for 0800 on Tuesdays. Try to keep up. Let's go. He didn't wait for an answer, just turned and walked back into the hall. Izuku scrambled to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs, and hurried to follow. Tony led him through a different series of corridors, taking a private elevator that descended deep into the compound. The air grew cooler, and the faint scent of ozone and hot metal grew stronger. The elevator opened directly into a space that made Izuku's breath catch in his throat. It was Tony Stark's personal workshop. It was a cathedral of controlled chaos. Holographic schematics for arc reactors and repulsor tech hung in the air like ghostly blueprints. Half-assembled gauntlets and armor pieces lay on workbenches next to high-tech soldering irons and diagnostic tools. A row of gleaming Iron Man suits, from the bulky Mark III to the sleek, recent models, stood in alcoves along one wall like a silent, metal army. A vintage motorcycle was in one corner, half disassembled. Loud, classic rock music pulsed from speakers Izuku couldn't see. Welcome to the candy shop, Tony said, gesturing vaguely at the wonderland of technology. He walked over to a central workbench. Rule 1, don't touch anything that looks expensive. He paused. Rule 2, everything looks expensive, so just don't touch anything. FRIDY is watching. She'll vaporize you. She won't, but she could, and the threat is what matters. Got it? Why yes, sir. Izuku squeaked, his eyes darting everywhere at once, trying to absorb every impossible detail. Good. Now for your first test. Izuku's blood ran cold. The test. The moment he would be exposed as a fraud. He braced himself. Was it a physical? An IQ test? Tony gestured to a clean, empty workstation with a single stool and a dark console. You're not going to be my sidekick, kid. You're not Robin. I'm not looking for someone to fetch my batarangs. This is an RD internship. Research and development. So, we're going to research, and you're going to develop. He tapped the console, and it shimmered to life, displaying a complex, three-dimensional schematic of an Iron Man leg armor piece. Lines of code and energy flow diagrams scrolled alongside it. This is the Mark 45 boot assembly, Tony explained, his tone all business now. There's a flaw in it. A minor one, but it bugs me. During high-G vertical thrust maneuvers, there's a fractional power feedback loop in the primary repulsor. It causes a 0.02% flight instability. All the other engineers said to just compensate with the flight control software. That's a patch, not a solution. I hate patches. He looked at Izuku, his gaze sharp and serious. I've been too busy to fix it. So you're going to. You have access to all the design specs, material data, and physics sims. Find the flaw in the hardware, and find a way to fix it. He pointed to the stool. The floor is yours. Don't break my multi-million-dollar toy. And with that, he walked over to his own workbench, put his back to Izuku, and started tinkering with the gauntlet, the music volume kicking up a notch. Izuku stared at the glowing schematic. The boot of the Iron Man suit. He was being asked to critique and improve the work of Tony Stark. The sheer, mind-numbing arrogance of the task was paralyzing. His hands hovered over the holographic keyboard, trembling. He couldn't do this. It was impossible. He was just a kid from Muzutafu. He didn't belong here. He took a shaky breath, the lyrics. I am Iron Man, echoing from the speakers. His fear was a high, keening sound in his ears. He was going to fail. Then, he looked closer at the screen. He saw the energy flow diagram, the tiny, almost imperceptible spike in the feedback loop. He saw the numbers, and something deep inside him, a gear that had been spinning uselessly for years, finally clicked into place. He closed his eyes for a second. He wasn't Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless failure. He was just an analyst. And this was just a problem. A system with a flaw. Like Mount Lady's quirk. Like Kamui Woods' weakness to fire. It was a puzzle. His trembling stopped. He pulled up a digital notepad on a secondary screen. His fingers, now steady, began to move. He started muttering, the old, familiar habit returning like a comforting blanket. Okay, feedback loop originates in the primary power conduit. It's an oscillation, not a steady surge. Happens at the point where the energy is channeled into the boot's repulsor matrix. The conduit is made of a gold titanium alloy, standard for high energy transfer. But maybe the issue isn't the material, it's the geometry. His muttering quickened, becoming a low, continuous hum of technical jargon, physics principles, and half-formed hypotheses. He spun the hologram around, zooming into a microscopic level. He cross-referenced the boot's power draw with the arc reactor's output specs. He ran simulations, his fingers flying across the holographic keys, pulling up windows and charts and equations with a speed that would have shocked his middle school teachers. He was no longer in Tony Stark's lab. He was inside the problem, mapping its contours, searching for its heart. The fear was gone, burned away by the clean, white-hot fire of pure intellectual focus. He found the flaw 20 minutes later. It was a tiny resonance issue. The specific frequency of the energy from the arc reactor was creating a harmonic vibration in the conduit's crystalline structure, causing a minute echo of power to flow backward. It was an elegant, almost undetectable mistake, but finding it wasn't enough. The instruction was to fix it. Solution 1, he thought, his fingers flying. A software fix. The easiest. A simple algorithm to filter the specific resonant frequency. It's a patch, just like Mr. Stark said he hated. Inefficient. It treats the symptom, not the cause. He typed it all out, complete with the proposed code, then filed it away under suboptimal. Solution 2, his muttering continued. A hardware fix. If the geometry is the problem, change the geometry. Rerouting the conduit in a gentle spiral instead of a direct line would disrupt the harmonic resonance. But that would require refabricating the entire boot chassis. Costly. Time-consuming. He drew up the new schematic anyway, calculating the new energy flow dynamics. He filed it under viable, but inelegant. He paused, staring at the core problem. The energy source. The conduit. The output. Where was the real inefficiency? He was thinking like a mechanic, fixing a broken part. He needed to think like an engineer. Like Tony Stark. Why a single conduit? The thought struck him like lightning. The system channels massive power through one pipe. It's a bottleneck. It's crude. Solution 3, he began, his heart pounding with the thrill of discovery. Decentralize the regulation. Don't change the conduit. Add to it. What if you embed a series of micro-regulators along the conduit's length? Not capacitors, regulators. Each one with a tiny processor that communicates with the main flight computer, actively adjusting the energy flow in real time. It wouldn't just solve the feedback loop. It would increase overall power efficiency by a predicted 4%. Flight stability would improve across the board, not just in vertical thrust. You could even use them to shape the repulsor blast for finer maneuvering. He lost himself completely. He designed the microregulators, specified the materials, wrote the base code for their operation, and ran a full simulation showing the Mark 45 boot performing a flawless vertical launch with his new system in place. The graph showed a perfectly smooth power curve. He finally leaned back, his mind feeling like it had just run a marathon. He was breathing heavily, his forehead beaded with sweat. He looked at his work, the 3 distinct, fully realized solutions, ranging from a simple patch to a fundamental redesign of the system. It was the most intense, most satisfying hour of his life. Slowly, the reality of his surroundings seeped back in. The rock music. The smell of coffee. The weight of Tony Stark's presence in the room. He turned on the stool, his anxiety returning in a rush. He had just spent an hour redesigning Iron Man's armor. He had probably overstepped. He had probably failed the real test, humility. "Mr. Stark, sir?" he said, his voice quiet. I think I'm finished." Tony didn't turn around. He was still welding the gauntlet, sparks flying. "You think you're finished or you are finished?" "I am finished, sir." "Good. What did you find?" Izuku began, ready to explain his whole process. "The issue is a harmonic resonance in the primary power conduit." "Yeah, I know." Tony cut in, still not looking at him. "Skip to the solution. What's your play?" "Well, I came up with 3 possible approaches. I only care about the best one," Tony said. Izuku swallowed. "The third one, I think. It's a bit ambitious. But instead of just fixing the feedback loop, I propose a system of embedded, self-regulating microprocessors along the conduit. It would decentralize power regulation, eliminate the resonance issue at its source, and increase overall energy efficiency by an estimated 4%. I called it the Dynamic Energy Flow Adjustment System, or DEFAS. His voice trailed off, sure he had gone too far. Tony finally stopped welding. The music cut out. The silence was absolute. He placed the gauntlet on the table and slowly turned around. He wasn't smiling. His face was completely neutral, his eyes unreadable. He walked over to Izuku's station, his footsteps echoing in the vast workshop. He looked at the simulation, at the schematics for the microregulators, at the reams of code and calculations. He was silent for a full minute, his eyes taking in every detail. Izuku felt his entire future shrink down to this single, terrifying moment. Then, the corner of Tony Stark's mouth twitched. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, not the smirking, camera-ready grin, but a rare expression of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. It was the look of a prospector who had just struck the motherlode. "DEFAS," Tony repeated, testing the word. He nodded slowly. "Not bad. A little clunky. We'll workshop it." He looked at Izuku, and for the first time, his eyes weren't just assessing him. They were seeing him. "Kid," he said, his voice filled with a strange, new warmth. "I didn't lie to you. That was a real problem. And my team of MIT and Caltech PhDs came up with your solution number 1. The patch." He tapped the screen displaying Izuku's third, most brilliant solution. This is what I was hoping to see. Not just a fix. A better way. You didn't just solve the puzzle. You redesigned the whole game." He clapped a hand on Izuku's shoulder, the weight of it both startling and incredibly grounding. "Welcome to the RD department," Tony Stark said, his smile widening into a full-blown grin. "Your real training starts now." The first day of his new life began at 0500 hours with a sound like a klaxon from a submarine. Izuku shot upright in bed, heart jackhammering in his chest, his mind still lost in dreams of oscillating power conduits and harmonic resonance. A single, stark message was glowing on the wall opposite his bed: physical conditioning. Track 01. 10 minutes. He stumbled out of bed, his body aching in places he didn't know could ache. The test in Tony's lab had bled late into the night, a marathon of intellectual exertion that had left his brain feeling both supercharged and completely drained. Sleep had been a brief, fitful affair. He pulled on the simple gray shorts, and t-shirt laid out for him and fumbled his way out of his quarters. The corridor was silent and dimly lit. A glowing green line appeared on the floor, leading him down hallways and through doors until he reached a cavernous gymnasium. The space was immense, outfitted with every piece of equipment imaginable, from familiar treadmills to strange, complex machines that looked like instruments of torture. Standing in the center of the polished wooden floor, arms crossed over his broad chest, was Happy Hogan. He looked even less pleased to be awake than Izuku felt. "Morning, sunshine!" Happy grunted, his voice a low rumble. He gestured to the indoor track that circled the perimeter of the gym. 5 miles. Go. At 5 miles? Izuku squeaked. The most he'd ever run in his life was a kilometer for the school fitness test, and he nearly coughed up a lung. "You heard me. The suit you're gonna build, whatever it is, it's not gonna be a lazy boy with rockets. It's going to be physically demanding. It's going to pull GS. It's going to put strain on your joints. It's going to demand stamina you don't have. Your body is the chassis, kid. The core component. And right now," Happy said, giving him a critical once-over that made Izuku feel like a wilting piece of lettuce. "Your chassis is a lemon. So run. Or jog. Or crawl. Just finish it." And so Izuku ran. The first mile was agony. His lungs burned, his legs felt like lead, and a sharp stitch developed in his side that felt like he was being stabbed with a knitting needle. Happy didn't follow him, just stood in the center, watching, his expression unchanging. By the second mile, Izuku's vision was starting to swim. He was a pathetic sight, his form sloppy, his breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. He wanted to stop. He wanted to collapse. But then he thought of the workshop. Of the quiet pride in Tony Stark's eyes. Of the promise of a future he could build. He thought of the alternative, the rooftop, the gray, empty despair. He grit his teeth and kept going. He slowed to a wheezing jog, then a walk, then back to a jog. He finished the 5 miles in a time so abysmal he was sure Happy would laugh. Instead, when he finally stumbled to a halt, leaning over with his hands on his knees, fighting the urge to vomit, Happy just tossed a water bottle at him. "Hydrate," he ordered. "You've got a 10-minute break. Then we start on core strength." That day set the template for the next 6 months. Every morning before sunrise, the klaxon would sound, and Izuku would meet Happy in the gym. The training was brutal and unforgiving, designed by Stark Industries' top physiologists and overseen by Happy's no-nonsense methodology. It wasn't about building a bodybuilder's physique. It was about forging a functional, resilient human machine. The 5-mile runs became a daily ritual. His time slowly, painfully improved. The runs were followed by grueling circuits of core exercises, flexibility training, and bodyweight conditioning. Happy was a harsh taskmaster, correcting his form with curt instructions. "Keep your back straight, Midoriya. You look like a question mark. Breathe, kid, don't hold it in. You'll pop." Once a week, they used the obstacle course. The first time Izuku saw it, his blood ran cold. It was a monstrous thing of high walls, rope climbs, balance beams, and claustrophobic tunnels. His first attempt was a complete failure. He couldn't even get over the first wall. He fell, scraped his knees, and lay on the padded mat in a heap of shame. Happy just stood over him. "Get up!" Izuku got up. He tried again. And again. Weeks turned into months. The scrawny, soft boy from Muzurifu began to change. The baby fat on his face melted away, replaced by lean angles. His perpetually slumped shoulders straightened. Muscle, wiry and dense, began to define his arms, legs, and torso. He still wasn't big, he never would be, but he was becoming solid. His relationship with Happy changed, too. The gruff annoyance was still there, but it was now layered with a grudging respect. Happy started running the first mile with him. He'd offer a curt, "Good work," after Izuku finally conquered the warped wall on the obstacle course. He even started calling him Izuku instead of Kid. One morning, after a particularly grueling sparring session, focused entirely on dodging, blocking, and finding escape routes, Izuku was on the mat, completely exhausted. "Why aren't you teaching me to punch?" Izuku asked, gasping for air. Happy looked down at him. "Tony's building you a suit, right? The suit will have weapons. Your job is to be the brain. The pilot. Not the fist. My job is to make sure you can survive long enough for the suit to do its work. It's to make sure that when some punk with a strength quirk throws a car at you and you have to dodge, your body doesn't snap in half. It's to make sure you can carry a 200-pound man out of a burning building without your spine turning to dust. Heroism isn't about throwing a punch, Izuku. It's about being the one left standing after everyone else has fallen. Now get up. We're not done. Izuku got up. The lesson was clear. His body was not a weapon. It was a shield. The last line of defense for the most important component of all, his mind. And his mind was being forged in an even hotter fire. After his morning torture session with Happy and a quick, nutrient-dense breakfast prescribed by Fridy, Izuku's day truly began. He would descend into the workshop, a place that now felt more like home than his room did. Tony was often already there, loud music blaring, surrounded by a halo of holographic screens. Tony's teaching style was the polar opposite of a traditional school. There were no lectures, no textbooks. It was a baptism by fire. The first week, Tony wheeled over a crate full of broken Stark drones, the kind used for security and reconnaissance around the compound. They're busted, Tony announced over the thrum of an AC/DC guitar riff. Lightning strike took out a whole squadron. Some have fried circuits, some have damaged rotors, some have corrupted software. I want 6 of them fully operational by the end of the week. For the first day, Izuku was lost. He stared at the tangled mess of wires and carbon fiber, completely overwhelmed. But then, his analytical mind took over. He started by sorting the parts, categorizing the damage. He pulled up the schematics, his muttering filling the silence between songs. Okay, Drone 01, impact damage to the primary rotor housing, but the logic board seems intact. I could salvage the board and use it in Drone 04, whose chassis is fine but whose board is completely fried, but the power couplings are different models. Could I design an adapter? A simple passive converter should work, if I can microsolder it without shorting the connection. He worked with a feverish intensity. He learned to solder under a microscope. He learned to write diagnostic code. He learned the practical, hands-on difference between theoretical physics and applied engineering. Tony would wander over periodically, glance at his work, and offer a cryptic piece of advice. You're thinking about the problem in 3 dimensions, kid, he said once, seeing Izuku struggle with a power distribution issue. Start thinking in 4. It's not just where the energy goes. It's when. The comment baffled Izuku for hours, until he had a sudden epiphany in the middle of the night. He wasn't just routing power, he was timing its delivery. He rewrote the drone's power management software, creating a system that pulsed energy to the rotors precisely when needed, increasing flight time by a staggering 15%. By the end of the week, he didn't have 6 operational drones. He had 7, and the 7th was a hybrid he'd built himself from all the leftover scraps, with his new, more efficient power management code installed. Tony looked at the 7th drone, a Frankenstein's monster of mismatched parts, as it hovered perfectly in the air. He didn't say a word, but the look in his eyes was all the praise Izuku needed. His education was relentless. 1 week, it was advanced materials science, studying the properties of gold titanium alloys and vibranium. The next, it was fluid dynamics, running simulations of how different armors would react to wind resistance and underwater pressure. He devoured programming languages, cybersecurity protocols, and strategic theory. His old notebooks were replaced by a series of encrypted Stark pads, but the habit was the same. They were filled with frantic muttering transcribed by Fridy, complex diagrams, and endless streams of analysis. He was applying the same obsessive focus he'd once used on All Might to arc reactor technology. The fundamental skill was identical, only the subject matter had changed. This intense education coalesced around a single, massive undertaking, their main project. It began one afternoon when Tony shut off the music and turned to him, his expression serious. All right, kid. We've been tuning up the engine. It's time to build the car. I'm giving you a blank check from the RD budget, access to any material in this compound, and my undivided attention for 2 hours every day. The project, a suit. For you. A hero's suit. So, tell me, what do we build? Izuku's heart leaped into his throat. This was it. The moment he'd been working towards. I don't know. He stammered, his mind going blank with the sheer scale of the question. Something like your suit? A smaller one? Tony sighed, shaking his head. Wrong answer. That's my suit. It was built for my problems by me. It's a deterrent. A weapon. A one-man army. That's not you. I'm not asking you to be Iron Man Jr., I'm asking you what you need. Forget what you've seen. Forget the pro-heroes in Japan. If you were running into that sludge villain incident today, what tools would you want to have? Start there. The question reframed everything. Izuku closed his eyes, picturing the scene. The fire. The screaming crowds. The heroes standing by, unable to act. Kaken, suffocating, his eyes snapped open, a fire lit within them. He grabbed a stylus and pulled up a blank holographic canvas. Okay, he said, his voice firm and clear. Okay. The first problem wasn't the villain. It was the situation. The chaos. The lack of information. The heroes didn't know the villain's weakness. They didn't know the hostage's condition. They didn't know the structural integrity of the buildings around them. So the first system, the most important system, has to be analysis. He began to sketch, his hand a blur. A helmet. A visor. Not just for protection, but a full-spectrum heads-up display. It needs a thermographic scanner to see people through smoke and rubble. It needs a resonance scanner to analyze structural weaknesses. And it needs a quirk scanner. Tony raised an eyebrow. A quirk scanner? That's theoretical tech, but it's possible. Izuku insisted, his muttering kicking into high gear. Quirks emit a unique energy signature. FRIDAY's initial analysis of the compound's resonance proves it. If the visor can scan and categorize those signatures, and cross-reference them with my own analytical database, I could identify a villain's quirk type, predict its limitations, and find its weakness in seconds. The visor becomes my notebook, but in real time. Tony leaned forward, intrigued. Go on, mobility. Izuku continued, sketching a sleek, lightweight torso and leg assembly. Full flight is too much. It's too power-intensive and the learning curve is too steep. I don't need to fly across a city, I need to navigate a disaster zone. So, repulsors. But smaller ones? In the boots and palms. Not for sustained flight, but for enhanced mobility. Repulsor-assisted jumps to clear debris or get to a rooftop. Gliding capability using flight surfaces that deploy from the back. Like a high-tech wingsuit. It's about agility, not speed. Okay, so you can see everything and jump around like a grasshopper. What happens when you come face to face with the bad guy? Tony challenged. What's your weapon? Izuku paused. That's the thing. I don't want traditional weapons. Lethal force should be the absolute last resort, not the first option. The goal is to save people, and sometimes that includes saving the villains from themselves. The goal is to de-escalate. To capture. He started sketching attachments on the suit's forearms. High-tensile capture foam. It expands on contact, it's non-toxic, and it can be dissolved with a specific agent. It can restrain a villain, but it can also be used to brace a falling piece of rubble or create a cushion for a civilian to fall on. Multi-purpose. He added another module. Electrified nets. A non-lethal takedown option. The voltage can be calibrated on the fly, from a small jolt to enough to knock out someone with a minor strength-enhancing quirk, and small, localized EMP charges. To disable tech, getaway vehicles, anything with a circuit board. He stopped, breathing hard, looking at the chaotic but brilliant collection of ideas on the screen. It was a suit designed not for war, but for rescue. A tool for a surgeon, not a soldier. Tony was quiet for a long time, studying the design. Rescue, analysis, and non-lethal takedowns, he said, summarizing the philosophy. You don't want to be a weapon. You want to be a solution. I want to be a hero, Izuku said softly. And heroes save people. A slow grin spread across Tony's face. All right, kid. I can work with this. FRIDY, designate a new project. Analysis Rescue Unit Mark I. Let's get to work. The next 3 months were a blur of creation. The workshop became their sanctuary. Izuku's theoretical designs were met with Tony's practical genius. Your capture foam idea is good, Tony said one day. But the deployment system is too slow. We'll use a compressed air system based on the Mark VI's flare deployment. Instantaneous. The armor plating needs to be light, Izuku argued. Or it will compromise the agility, so we won't use the standard titanium alloy, Tony countered, pulling up a schematic. We'll use a carbon nanotube composite weave, layered with a ceramic outer shell for shock absorption. It's lighter than aluminum, stronger than steel. It'll stop a pistol round, but it won't slow you down. They built it together. Izuku spent days calibrating the delicate sensors for the visor, his hands steady and sure. Tony personally forged the composite plates, his advanced fabrication units glowing day and night. Izuku wrote the base code for the user interface, designing it to be intuitive, to respond to his own thought patterns. Tony refined it, making it seamless and linking it directly to FRIDY. The day it was finished, the workshop was silent. The music was off. In the center of the room, held by a gleaming robotic armature, stood the suit. It was beautiful. It wasn't a bulky Iron Man clone. It was sleek, ergonomic, and form-fitting, designed around the lean, athletic body Izuku now possessed. The primary color was a deep, vibrant green, the color of his hair, accented with panels of matte black on the torso and limbs. Thin, precise lines of glowing red light traced the seams, indicating the power flow. The helmet was elegant, with a black visor and 2 fin-like protrusions on the side that resembled a stylized version of All Might's hair, a small, personal homage that Tony had added without comment. It looked powerful but not aggressive. It looked heroic. Go on, Tony said, his voice quiet. Try it on. With help from the armature, Izuku stepped into the suit. The plates clicked and whirred into place around him, fitting with the satisfying finality of a key in a lock. The final piece was the helmet, which lowered over his head and sealed with a soft hiss. For a second, there was only darkness and silence. Then, the world exploded in a symphony of light and data. System online. Vital signs nominal. Power, 100%. Welcome, Izuku. FRIDY's calm voice echoed directly in his mind. The visor flickered to life. He saw the workshop, but it was overlaid with a translucent layer of information. Tony had a blue wireframe around him, with text reading, Anthony E. Stark. No apparent threat. He looked at a workbench, and a list of the tools on it scrolled by. He could feel the suit, a subtle hum of power running through it, an extension of his own body. How's it feel? Tony's voice came through the comms, crystal clear. It's everything. Izuku breathed, his voice choked with emotion. Let's test the mobility. Just a little hop. 10% power to the boot repulses. Just think it. Izuku focused. He thought about jumping, just a small leap. A soft, powerful whump sound emanated from his boots, and he was suddenly airborne. He hadn't just jumped. He'd been launched 10 feet into the air, his head brushing against a low-hanging gantry. He yelped in surprise, flailing, and landed in an ungraceful heap on a padded mat Tony had conveniently positioned below. Tony's laughter rang through the comms. Okay, maybe 5%. It's got a bit of a kick. Izuku got up, his entire body buzzing with adrenaline and pure, unadulterated joy. He felt powerful. Not because he could punch through a wall, but because he could do something. He felt capable. Later, as he stood out of the suit, admiring it, Tony came and stood beside him. It needs a name, Tony said. The official designation is boring. Every hero needs a name. What are you going to call yourself? Izuku looked at the green suit, a reflection of himself staring back from the polished visor. He thought about his past. About the name that had been used to hurt him his entire life. The brand seared into his soul by Kaken, by a society that valued power above all else. Deku. Useless. The one who can't do anything. But that wasn't true anymore. Standing here, in this workshop, surrounded by proof of what his mind and his will could accomplish, the name felt different. It was a scar, yes, but he had a choice. He could let it remain a symbol of his weakness, or he could redefine it. He could turn the poison into medicine. Deku, Izuku said, his voice surprisingly firm. Tony raised an eyebrow. Deku? FRIDY translation. Deku is a Japanese term, often used pejoratively to mean useless or good for nothing. The AI supplied. Tony looked at him, his expression softening with understanding. You want to name yourself useless? Kid, we just spent 6 months proving that's the one thing you're not. I know, Izuku said, a small, determined smile on his face. He met Tony's gaze, his eyes shining with newfound confidence. It used to mean that. But now it'll be a reminder that even someone everyone called useless can still be a hero. I want to take the name that used to hurt me and turn it into something that gives people hope. It's a name that means I can do anything. Tony was silent for a moment, and in his eyes, Izuku saw a universe of respect. He saw the man who had been called a merchant of death, and had forged himself into Iron Man. He saw someone who understood, more than anyone, the power of reinvention. Tony Stark clapped him on the shoulder, a wide, proud grin on his face. Deku, he said, rolling the name on his tongue. It's got a ring to it. I like it. He gestured to the sleek, green machine. The Analysis Rescue Unit Mark I, or as the press will probably call it, the Deku suit. The Imperial Hotel in Tokyo was a bastion of old-world luxury, a place where hushed tones and impeccable service were the currency of the realm. It was a world away from the Chroman circuit board chaos of Tony Stark's workshop, and an even farther cry from the adrenaline-fueled pandemonium of the Shinjuku Scramble. It was, Tony had decided, the perfect place for an ambush of the diplomatic variety. He sat in a plush armchair in one of the hotel's most exclusive private suites, a glass of something amber and expensive swirling in his hand. The view from the panoramic window showcased the sprawling urban galaxy of Tokyo, a testament to a different kind of power, the relentless thrum of human endeavor. He was supposed to be in a meeting with the Minister of Defense, but he delegated that particular slice of boredom to Pepper. He had a much more interesting appointment. He's on his way up, boss. A FRIDY's voice murmured from a speaker hidden in a nearby lamp. His vital signs are curious. He presents with chronic respiratory distress, a severely reduced muscle mass index, and what appears to be a catastrophically healed injury to his left side. Heart rate is elevated. Nervous to meet his idol, I expect, Tony said with a smirk, taking a sip of his drink. Let me know the second he steps out of the elevator. Izuku was blissfully unaware of the high-stakes meeting about to take place. He was in the suite's adjoining room, ostensibly on standby, but in reality, he was hunched over a Stark pad, completely absorbed. The data from the field test was a treasure trove. His HUD had recorded everything: the villain's quirk energy signatures, the tensile strength failure of the capture foam, the exact power curve of the overcharge protocol. He was a whirlwind of analysis, his fingers flying across the screen, muttering under his breath. The foam's failure wasn't chemical, it was structural. The kinetic buildup created microfractures. A new formula needs a flexible polymer lattice to disperse sharp, directional force. The overcharge was too much of a brute force solution. If I could have modulated the output, created a shaped charge of repulsor energy, I could have achieved the same result with half the power drain. It needs a better regulator, like a miniature version of the DEFA's system. He was so lost in his work that he didn't hear the soft chime of the elevator, nor the quiet footsteps in the other room. He was just a boy with a puzzle, and it was the most fascinating puzzle in the world. In the main room, the suite door slid open. A man stood there, looking profoundly out of place. He was skeletally thin, his blonde hair falling in two lank bangs around a face that seemed permanently etched with pain and exhaustion. He wore a baggy, pale yellow suit that hung off his bony frame like a sheet on a scarecrow. This was Toshinori Yagi, the man behind the myth, the walking ghost of the symbol of peace. Mr. Stark, Toshinori said, his voice a reedy whisper. He gave a slight, formal bow. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Please come in. Have a seat. Drink? Tony gestured to the armchair opposite his own. Though FRIDY tells me your doctor would probably advise against it, Toshinori's eyes widened slightly at the mention of his medical condition. He shuffled into the room, his movements careful, as if his own body were a fragile, antique vase. He lowered himself into the chair, declining the offer of a drink with a polite wave of his hand. "I will be direct, Mr. Stark," Toshinori began, his gaunt face set with a grim seriousness. "I am here about young Midoriya, I figured," Tony said, taking another sip. "He's made quite a splash. Deku. Catchy. My marketing department loves it. They're already mocking up action figures. One version comes with capture foam's silly string. It's going to be a hit." The flippancy was a carefully crafted tool, designed to disarm and provoke. Toshinori did not rise to the bait. "What you are doing is unconscionably dangerous," he said, his voice low but intense. "You have taken a quirkless, impressionable boy and placed him in the heart of a world that will chew him up and spit him out. You have strapped a target to his back. I gave him a shield," Tony countered, his smile fading. He leaned forward, the playful billionaire persona evaporating, replaced by the sharp, focused mind of the engineer. "I gave him a tool. His mind, his heart, those were already on the front lines. The only thing he was missing was the hardware to survive it. You should know. You were the one who told him to give up." The words struck Toshinori like a physical blow. He flinched, a flicker of deep, profound shame crossing his face. He stammered. "I made a mistake. I was trying to protect him. I saw his heroic spirit, but I also saw the reality of his situation. I saw a boy who would throw his life away for nothing." "For nothing?" Tony's voice was sharp. "He saved that other kid's life. My AI confirmed it. His desperate, useless action gave the victim the one breath he needed to survive until you showed up to take all the credit. You saw a liability. I saw a hero who just needed better equipment." A tense silence filled the room, thick with the clash of two fundamentally different worldviews. "That equipment is a crutch!" Toshinori finally burst out, a flash of his old All Might fire in his eyes. He coughed, a racking, painful sound, and pressed the handkerchief to his lips. When he pulled it away, there was a small speck of blood on the white cloth. He hid it quickly, but Tony's eyes, and FRIDY's sensors, missed nothing. "A true hero's strength comes from within," Toshinori continued, his breath ragged. "It is the power of the human spirit, the indomitable will to push beyond one's limits. It is a symbol that inspires others to do the same. What you are teaching him is to rely on batteries and circuits. What happens when the power runs out? We saw what happened. He fell from the sky like a stone. Had that pro-hero, Slugger, not been there, he would have deployed the suit's emergency airbag, which has a 98% success rate of preventing fatal injury from a 50-foot fall." Tony interrupted coolly. "It's all in the design. I don't build things with a single point of failure." "That's your territory." Toshinori stared at him, taken aback. "My territory? Your whole philosophy," Tony explained, standing up and walking to the window. He looked down at the city below. "The symbol of peace. It's a brilliant concept. Inspiring, effective, and catastrophically flawed. You've created a society of spectators. They stand by and watch disaster unfold, waiting for their symbol to show up and fix everything. They wait for you. But what happens when you're not there? What happens when you're a day late, or an hour too slow? What happens when you finally retire, or fall in battle?" He turned back to face Toshinori, his gaze piercing. "The whole system is built on one man. One power. It's a house of cards, and you, my friend, are the single card at the bottom holding the whole thing up, and from what I'm seeing," he added, his eyes flickering towards the hidden, blood-stained handkerchief, "that card is starting to look a little frayed around the edges." The accusation, blunt and brutally accurate, hung in the air. Toshinori sagged in his chair, the fire in his eyes extinguished, replaced by a deep, weary sorrow. He looked old. He looked defeated. "You do not understand," he whispered. "It is more than just my power. It is a torch. A sacred trust, passed down from one generation to the next, growing stronger with each user. It is the crystallization of hope." "You're talking about one for all," Tony said simply. The air in the room went still and cold. Toshinori's head snapped up, his eyes wide with utter shock and disbelief. How could you possibly? Tony tapped the side of his glasses. FRIDY cross-reference your medical data, your known associates, and the historical records of quirks manifesting in previously quirkless individuals. She flagged a statistical anomaly centered around your mentor, Nana Shimura, and her predecessor. The energy signature FRIDY reads off you is unique. It's not one quirk. It's multiple energy signatures layered dormant. And it's transferable. It was the only logical explanation. He shrugged. Took my AI about 12 minutes to figure it out. You guys need better firewalls. Toshinori was speechless. His greatest secret, the foundational truth of his existence, had been unraveled by a machine in the time it took to make a pot of tea. He felt naked, exposed. And you're looking for a successor, Tony continued, pressing his advantage. Someone to pass the sacred torch to. Let me guess. Young Midoriya was on your short list. Heroic heart, selfless spirit, checks all the boxes. You were going to give him the one thing he always wanted, and in doing so, turn him into the next you. The next single point of failure. He walked back to his chair and sat down, leaning forward with an intense, earnest expression. Don't you see the opportunity here, Toshinori? Don't you see what Izuku represents? He's the alternative. He is the proof that you don't need a God-given power to be a hero. He is the symbol that human ingenuity, intelligence, and sheer force of will are powers in their own right. A hero that anyone, theoretically, could become. Not born but built. That's a symbol that empowers everyone. It doesn't ask them to wait for a savior. It inspires them to be their own. Tony's voice was filled with a fiery conviction, the passion of a builder, a creator. You want to build a successor. I want to build a better future, a future that isn't dependent on one person's health, on one magic quirk. Our boy, Izuku, he can be the bridge between those two philosophies. He can be the first of a new kind of hero. Toshinori listened, his mind reeling. Stark's words were a fundamental challenge to everything he believed in, to the legacy he was sworn to uphold. He had always seen the world in binary terms, those with power, and those without. His mission was to bestow power upon the worthy. Stark's mission was to prove that power could be created from nothing. He looked at this man, this arrogant, brilliant, infuriating man. He saw the arc reactor glowing faintly through his shirt, a miniature star that Stark had built in a cave to save his own life. He had literally forged his own heart. Perhaps he did understand something about heroism that Toshinori, born with the potential for greatness, could never fully grasp. A seed of doubt, small but potent, was planted in Toshinori's mind. He had come here to save Izuku from Tony Stark. But what if Stark was the one saving Izuku from the gilded cage of One for All? What if a boy defined by his lack of power was the last person who should be given an ultimate one? The silence was broken by a soft knock on the door connecting the two suites. A moment later, Izuku poked his head in, his face glowing with excitement, oblivious to the monumental tension in the room. Mr. Stark? Sorry to interrupt, but I think I've solved the power drain issue from the overcharge protocol, he said, holding up his Stark pad, which was covered in complex equations. If we create a dedicated capacitor bank using a graphene superpolymer, we can store a single overcharge shot without tapping the main core. It would be a one-use system per mission, but it wouldn't risk a total suit shutdown, and the recharge cycle back at the base would only be about an hour. The weight addition is negligible if we replace the... He trailed off, finally noticing the other person in the room. His eyes widened as he recognized the skeletal form of his former idol. All Might? Izuku stammered, his excitement instantly replaced by a wave of confusion and anxiety. He instinctively took a half-step back, his mind flashing back to the rooftop, to the crushing finality of the hero's words. Toshinori looked at the boy. He wasn't seeing the tear-streaked, desperate fan he had left on that roof. He was seeing a young man radiating confidence and purpose. His eyes, once cloudy with despair, were now sharp and clear, burning with intelligence. He was talking about capacitor banks and graphene polymers with the same passion he had once reserved for hero trivia. He was vibrant. He was whole. This was Tony Stark's work. Young Midoriya, Toshinori said, his voice soft. It is good to see you looking so well. You too, Izuku mumbled, clutching his Stark pad to his chest like a shield. He glanced nervously between the two men. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, kid, Tony said, standing up and stretching. Mr. Yagi and I were just having a spirited debate on heroing philosophies. He's a bit of a traditionalist. I'm more of a futurist. We were agreeing to disagree. He put a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Show me what you've got with that capacitor idea. If it works, we can get the fabricators started on a prototype tonight. As Tony steered a still confused Izuku back towards the other room, talking animatedly about power-to-weight ratios, Toshinori watched them go. He saw the easy camaraderie between them, the shared language of creation and problem-solving. It was a partnership, a true mentorship. Stark wasn't just giving the boy tools, he was teaching him how to invent them. He had come here to pull Izuku away from a dangerous path. But as he sat alone in the silent, opulent suite, a new, unsettling thought began to form. Perhaps his path, the path of one for all, was the more dangerous one. It promised godlike power, but at what cost? Would it overwrite the brilliant, analytical mind he had just witnessed? Would it bury the unique hero that Izuku was building himself to be under the weight of a century-old legacy? Toshinori Yagi stood up, his bones aching. He had lost the debate. But more than that, he felt a profound sense of uncertainty about a future he had always thought was clear. He left the suite without another word, his mind a whirlwind of doubt. His mission had changed. He no longer needed to save Izuku Midoriya. He needed to observe him. He needed to understand if this new path, this path of chrome and circuits forged by an arrogant American genius, was truly the future of heroism. And he needed to decide, once and for all, if a boy who had learned to fly without wings should ever be burdened with carrying a torch. The fate of the symbol of peace, he realized with a dawning, terrifying clarity, might depend on it. Meanwhile, in the next room, Izuku was excitedly sketching on his pad. And, by nesting the capacitor bank within the backplate assembly, we can use the suit's main inertial dampeners to offset the added mass, so my flight dynamics will be virtually unchanged. Tony watched him, a genuine, unguarded smile on his face. That's my boy, he said, ruffling Izuku's already messy green hair. You're thinking like an engineer. For Izuku, the tense meeting was already forgotten, lost in the pure joy of the problem. He didn't know that he had just become the focal point of a philosophical war between two of the world's greatest heroes. He didn't know that he was the living embodiment of a question that could redefine his entire society. He just knew that he had a capacitor to design, and a better suit to build. And for the first time in his life, that felt like more than enough.